You won't believe what happened when my HOA Karen decided to help with my exotic fish. I've spent years carefully curating a stunning aquarium at home, complete with rare, beautiful fish. But one day, out of nowhere, the HOA Karen decided to take matters into her own hands. Without asking, she thought it would be a good idea to release my prized fish into the community pool. Sounds insane, right? But what she didn't know, and what I had to quickly learn the hard way, was that releasing exotic fish into a public pool isn't just an irresponsible mistake. It's actually a $10,000 fine and, yes, even possible jail time. Imagine my shock when I found out the consequences of her actions. I was left with a total mess, not to mention the risk of being slapped with hefty fines and facing legal trouble. So, what happened next? Did I get hit with a huge fine, or was there a way to fix this before things got worse? Stick around to find out how I dealt with this crazy situation, because trust me, it's a wild ride from here on out. You won't want to miss what happens next. I should have known something was off when I saw her snooping around my backyard earlier that morning. The HOA Karen, as I've come to call her, always had this way of sticking her nose into everyone's business. At first, I thought maybe she was just checking the fences or making sure our lawns were properly trimmed, which is her usual thing. But as the day went on, I noticed she was paying a little too much attention to my backyard, where I kept my aquarium. You see, these weren't just any fish. They were exotic species, some rare ones I'd spent a small fortune on. I'd even gotten them shipped from overseas, taking extra care to make sure they were in the perfect environment. It wasn't just a hobby for me, it was a passion. So when I walked outside later and found my fish tank empty, I didn't know what to think at first. I rushed to the pool, and there they were swimming around in the water like it was a vacation for them. I couldn't believe my eyes. What was she thinking? This wasn't a harmless prank. This was a serious violation. As I started to realize the full scope of what had happened, panic set in. I had no idea what to do, or if she even realized the trouble she was causing. The more I thought about it, the more I realized this wasn't just about the fish anymore. It was about dealing with someone who had no concept of boundaries. The first thing I did was rush over to the HOA office to see if they knew anything about this. Maybe, just maybe, she'd been given some sort of permission, or at least a warning about her actions. When I got there, the receptionist barely looked up from her phone, but I could tell by her expression something was off. She wasn't even surprised when I told her what happened. It was like this wasn't the first time someone had come to complain about Karen. "I think you're gonna have to talk to her directly," she said, barely hiding a smirk. She can be a bit overzealous about the rules. It hit me then that this wasn't just a random act of carelessness, this was personal. Karen had always been vocal about improving the neighborhood, which in her mind meant controlling everything from how the grass was cut to what decorations people put up. I always ignored her before, but now it seemed like she'd taken it too far. As I stood there fuming, I started to wonder how far she was willing to go to make an example of me. What if this was just one of many ways she tried to push her agenda? Could she somehow turn the tables and make it look like I was the one in the wrong? I needed answers. I had to confront her, but I wasn't sure if that was a smart move. Karen had a way of twisting situations to her advantage, and with my fish still floating around in that pool, I knew I had to act fast before the HOA or the authorities started catching wind of it all. The more I thought about it, the more I realized I had no choice but to confront her directly. I couldn't let her get away with this, especially after she'd messed with something I cared so much about. I grabbed my phone and called a few friends who knew about the fish situation. They were as shocked as I was, but told me I needed to get proof. If I was going to make a case, I needed solid evidence. So I decided to head over to Karen's house and see if I could get some kind of admission from her, some way to catch her in the act. As I walked down the street toward her place, my heart raced. I could already hear her voice in my head, all high and mighty, ready to justify her actions. I wondered if she would try to twist the situation and make me the villain somehow. What if she started accusing me of breaking HOA rules or tried to get me in trouble for some other petty thing? I reached her front door and knocked, but there was no answer. I tried again. Nothing. Then, I noticed her car in the driveway. She was definitely home. My anxiety grew as I knocked harder, my fingers clenched around my phone, ready to record if she tried to pull something shady. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, I heard footsteps. The door creaked open, and there she was, standing in the doorway with that smug look I'd grown to dread. She didn't say anything at first, just stared at me as if she knew exactly why I was there. The silence between us was suffocating. The tension thickened, and I knew that whatever happened next was going to decide everything. Would I get the truth out of her? Or was this about to spiral even further into something I couldn't control? I took a deep breath, ready for whatever was coming next. She stood there for a moment, staring at me with that unnerving calmness, before finally speaking. "What do you want?" Her voice was cool, like she was in control of the situation, but I wasn't going to let her off that easily. I tried to stay composed as I explained what happened with the fish, the pool, everything. I was waiting for her to at least offer some kind of explanation, or at the very least apologize. But instead, she just shrugged, like it was no big deal. "They'll be fine," she said. "I didn't think you'd mind." That's when the surprise hit me, something I didn't expect at all. As she casually dismissed the situation, I noticed a familiar face peeking through her window. Another neighbor, someone I'd seen around, but didn't really know. He waved at me, looking oddly nervous. Before I could make sense of it, Karen's expression shifted. She stepped forward, blocking the doorway. "You don't know the whole story," she said, her tone suddenly more serious. "You're not the only one who's been trying to fix things around here." My mind was racing. What did she mean by that? "What do you mean?" I asked, my voice low, almost a whisper. She looked at me, as if deciding whether to tell me something crucial. "You think I was the only one who wanted your fish gone? Think again." I froze. The words hit harder than I expected. Karen wasn't acting alone. The entire neighborhood, at least a few key people in the HOA, had been involved. My stomach dropped. How deep did this go? What were they really trying to do? And how could I ever expose this if it meant going up against the whole HOA? The silence between us thickened, and for the first time, I realized just how much trouble I was in. This wasn't just a simple misunderstanding. It was part of something much bigger. I needed to know what was coming next. But the more I learned, the more dangerous it became. Would anyone believe me? Or was I already too late to stop them? I stared at Karen, my mind racing, trying to make sense of what she'd just said. "What do you mean, Karen? Who else is involved?" I asked, my voice now a little more desperate, a little more demanding. Her calm facade cracked slightly, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of something almost nervous in her eyes. She hesitated, as if deciding whether to tell me everything, but then her lips curled into that smug smile again. "It doesn't matter," she said coldly. "You're not getting the fish back." Before I could react, the neighbor who'd been watching us through the window came rushing over. His face was pale, but there was a strange urgency in his step. "Listen, man, I didn't know it would go this far," he said, looking around nervously like he feared someone might hear. "Karen, she's been pushing the HOA's agenda too far. It's not just about the fish. She's been doing things like this to other neighbors, trying to force everyone to follow her rules." My head was spinning. This wasn't just about a few fish or a neighborhood squabble. It was bigger than that. The HOA wasn't just enforcing rules anymore. They were turning the entire neighborhood into their own personal control zone. I could feel the weight of it all bearing down on me. That's when I realized I had one last card to play. I'd been recording the entire conversation on my phone, everything she said. I had proof now. Proof of her involvement and the HOA's shady tactics. But just as I was about to pull out my phone to show her, the unexpected happened. Karen's smile faded, and in a split second, she lunged at me, trying to knock the phone from my hand. In that moment, everything slowed down. She wasn't just defending her actions anymore, she was desperate to cover something up. My heart pounded as I gripped the phone tightly, struggling to keep it out of her reach. The neighbor stepped forward, his voice shaking. "Karen, stop," he yelled. "It's not worth it. They'll find out everything." But it was too late. Karen's eyes were wild now, and as she grabbed my wrist, I felt a sudden jolt of fear. This wasn't just a petty HOA dispute anymore. It had escalated to something dangerous. The situation was spiraling out of control, and I had to act fast. My phone slipped from my grip as I fought to break free from her hold. In the chaos, I caught a glimpse of something that made my stomach drop. A police car pulling up to the curb. Had the neighbor called them? Was this the end of everything? Just as Karen pulled me closer, I managed to catch a glimpse of the officer stepping out of the car, and that's when it hit me. The officer wasn't here to help me. He was here for Karen. A rush of realization flooded over me. She'd been getting too greedy with her power, and now it was all coming crashing down. The truth was finally going to come out, but not in the way she had expected. As the officer approached us, Karen froze, her face drained of color. The neighbor stepped back, shaking his head in disbelief. I was left standing there, uncertain of what would happen next, but knowing one thing for sure, this wasn't the end. It was just the beginning of a much bigger story that was far from over. As the officer approached, Karen stood frozen, her eyes darting between me and the police car like she was trying to figure out a way out of this. The officer didn't waste any time. "Ma'am, we've received reports about some questionable behavior around here," he said, his tone firm but not aggressive. "You're going to need to come with me." Karen's face turned pale as she realized the jig was up. The neighbor who'd helped me just stood there, watching in shock. As the officer cuffed Karen, he turned to me and nodded, offering a simple, "You're free to go." It took a moment to sink in, but when it did, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. Not just because I had the proof to clear my name, but because I knew Karen's reign of manipulation was finally over. The HOA would have to reevaluate its leadership, and I wasn't the only one who'd been dealing with her chaos. In the weeks that followed, things in the neighborhood slowly began to improve. People spoke out, and changes were made to ensure no one else would face what I had. The fish, believe it or not, found a new home with me, safe and sound. But the real takeaway here: never underestimate the power of standing up for yourself, and never let anyone control your peace.